Chapter 5, Queen of New York. The bosses at Hot called me and told me to come in early. I took New Jersey Transit from my parents' house. I had no idea what they wanted. It was very unusual for them to call me early, especially knowing that I had to do an overnight shift that night. But I came, no questions asked. When I got there, I walked into the general manager's office and one of his flunkies informed me that I was fired. They didn't give me a reason, and once again I was forced to accept how unpredictable and crazy my business is. They didn't give me a reason, and they didn't have to, unless you're a big player. And there was a clear difference between me and Al Bandera, who was a big player. I was making after scale. He was working on a major six-figure contract. Once again, I had no recourse. I tried to fight back the tears. I didn't want these motherfuckers to get that, but I couldn't help it. They started flowing. I cried right there in the office and asked one of the dumbest questions that has ever come out of my mouth. Well, what am I going to do now? I don't know. Go get married and have some babies, the flunky said. He didn't say something reasonable like, go to another city and work someplace else for a while and try to come back. No, he said get married and have some babies. That pissed me off even more. I collected my stuff with my shoulders heaving from crying. Not one person came over and patted me on the back or tried to comfort me. I was never the kind of employee who people felt connected to. I was very standoffish and didn't extend myself. Not because I didn't like people. I love people. It's just that I didn't want to form any radio relationships because when shit is going good, you don't have any friends. And when shit is going bad, you don't need anyone pitying you. Because I was only making union scale, there was no contract to break and no paperwork to fill out. I was just fired. Goodbye. But not having a contract worked in my favor, too. They couldn't stop me from getting a job at a New York station that next hour if I could. If I had a contract and was fired, they often write in non-competes, preventing you from working in the area for a period of time. I had no such restrictions. After collecting my shit, I hopped a train to a friend's apartment in Newark and started working the phones. I had been part of the New York radio scene for 2 years. Surely somebody would want to hire me. After making a few calls, I found out that there was an opening at WPLJ. I called the station and the program director asked me to come in. He was familiar with my work at Hot and offered me the evening shift from 10 to 2 in the morning. I was coming off overnights and slowly moving toward making a name for myself. The woman who had the shift, Linda NRG, was being moved to the morning team. That was the summer of 1989. I was happy at WPLJ, but I knew there were bigger fish to fry. One August day, I was walking down the street heading to the station and I bumped into Bugsy, a popular jock at WBLS. To this day, Bugsy is one of the most gracious, most well-versed people in the business that I know. He told me he was a fan of mine and that I was making quite a name for myself. He also told me that Tony Gray, program director at Kiss FM, was also a fan of mine. I was very flattered and honored. Bugsy and Tony Gray were in urban radio, the pinnacle to me. I was in white radio, and they still knew what I was doing. I wasn't going to urban radio parties. I was busy hosting parties for white radio. White radio and black radio don't mix. The industry is small, but the lines are drawn and they are definitive. But if you are black on white radio, people will know you. I should have gone to some of the urban radio parties just to get my face out there. And it would not have been unusual at all for me to be there. While everybody was out partying, I was working, and during the day, I was sleeping. And in between it all, I had a cocaine habit, which I was desperately trying to keep secret. But in the midst of all of that, I still managed to cross over. Tony Gray was a fan. I called Tony Gray the next week. He surprisingly already knew I was working at PLJ. I asked him if he had anything going on at Kiss. He told me he only had part-time work, which meant I would be making 155 a shift. After wages went up a bit versus the 50,000 I was now making at PLJ, not including appearance fees. But I took Tony's offer and said goodbye to PLJ. Growing up in Ocean Township was a wonderful learning experience for me in several different ways. One way in particular, being forced to deal with so many white people, thereby learning what they really think of blacks. Working at Hot and PLJ wasn't just about working with the white people at the station, it was catering to a majority white fan base. Tony Gray presented me the opportunity to work for an urban station, playing the music I chose to listen to when I got in my car. He never promised me a full time job, but I had come far enough in my career to have enough belief in myself that something would jump off. I was still living at my parents' house and had no debt and only one expense cocaine, which was relatively cheap. I could still take the chance and see what happened. I had done well by my money, too. This was before the bling bling era, and I wasn't tricking out my money on clothes and jewelry. This was back during the time when Madonna had a boutique in Macy's and when wearing ripped t shirts and jeans and rubber bands on your wrists were cool. Taking this job at Kiss on the surface seemed really crazy. For one, it was a station with established jocks under contract. How in the world would I ever get a shift? Let's be real. You count on getting ahead based on people fucking up their job. They had Carol Ford in the afternoon. I finally got to meet her in person and I gushed all over. She was very sweet. There was no way I was taking her spot. Chris Welch was doing middays. I wasn't taking his spot either. Yvonne Mobley was doing nights, and Diana King, who had left WBLS to come to Kiss, was the first option at fill-in. Not only did I not have a regular shift, I was backup to the backup. I knew my old college schoolmate would get the first call whenever a jock called in sick or went on vacation. I was called next. Why would I take this job? Futuristic vision. I knew it eventually, somehow, I would get a shot. In addition to working part time at Kiss, Diana also had a part time job at Lane Bryant. And oftentimes, when the station would call, she was at Lane Bryant and couldn't just up and leave on the spot. I, on the other hand, was always available. I had purchased a beeper when I was at Hot, which was only used by my bosses to page me if they needed me to fill in. No one else had that beeper number but my bosses. Upon being hired at Kiss, I gave that number to my bosses there. If they needed me, I would be there. In fact, I was usually there anyway. Even though I didn't have a regular shift, I would come into the city from my parents' house every day just in case. I would either sit in the jock lounge and read the daily news or go shopping. But I didn't want to be too far if they needed me to fill in. And as it turned out, I was filling in a lot. About a week after I was hired, Tony Gray, my fan, left the station. They promoted the music director, Vinnie Brown, into his spot. Vinnie had been a jock in a small town down south somewhere before coming to New York. And now he was thrust into the big time, overseeing Kiss. He was new, I was new, and we hit it off. He loved that he could rely on me. And when I filled in for anyone, not only was I as good as the jock I was replacing, in many cases, I was even better. Kiss and WBLS were the only urban stations in town. And BLS, in an attempt to take the top spot, started stealing a lot of talent from Kiss. They stole Mike Love, our morning man, and they were coming after anyone not under contract. The ground was rumbling. Kiss, knowing wasn't under contract, did not want to lose me to WBLS. They formulated a new morning show featuring Ken Webb and Jeff Fox, and they brought me in full time. It was called the Kiss Wake Up Club. They locked me into a contract, and I would do the traffic and dish the dirt, a segment that I invented. Kiss canceled the official traffic service, and I would call in and get the traffic and report it every 10 minutes. I wasn't trained to do the traffic, but I was flattered that Kiss wanted to save me. I was trained in dishing the dirt, though. That was the early version of what I'm most known for today. I would read the papers and report the dealings of celebrities. And I would go to the parties and do my celebrity spottings and let the audience know what was going on at the parties, too. In addition to my spot on the Wake Up Club, I became the official spokesperson for Nutrisystem. They were one of the station's biggest advertisers, and I got a nice paycheck to do a few spots for them every day. This was a way for me to keep my voice and name out there during the entire day. A couple of spots would run on each shift. I would ad lib for 60 seconds telling everyone how wonderful Nutrisystem was, Hi, everybody. This is Wendy Williams for Nutrisystem, and I will proceed to tell them about my fat bubbling over on the train and how much I appreciated the job Nutrisystem was doing on my body. At this point, the weight loss I had experienced from my Coke diet had long since worn off. I was definitely pushing 200 pounds, making me the perfect spokesperson for Nutrisystem. Hi, everybody. This is Wendy Williams for Nutrisystem. The holidays are here, and my mother's cooking, but I'm on Nutrisystem. They have these turkey patties. You pull out the hot sauce and you get you a piece of lettuce and you can enjoy the holidays without missing out on a delicious meal. After 1 year on the Wake Up Club, Vinny gave me my own shift, 6 to 10 in the evening. Diana was very pissed. She had gotten to New York first. She was Frankie Crocker's fill-in. She had gotten to Kiss before me. When BLS was stealing people, they didn't offer her a contract. They gave it to me. And now I was getting a shift while she was still doing fill-ins. It was the latter part of 1990. I was being paid 60,000 plus appearances, plus Nutrisystem money. I expanded my Dishing the Dirt to my night show where celebrities would frequent the studio for interviews, and I developed my style of high drama and scandalosity. I was having a ball. My Coke connection from Hot followed me to Kiss. He was no longer working for Hot, but he always had a side job in addition to dealing Coke. He would be doing security someplace and dealing Coke. He would be driving a truck and dealing Coke. He would be working for UPS and dealing Coke. I'm doing nights at Kiss and I'm up to my same old Coke tricks. But it's getting more difficult to hide because people are starting to know who I am. When I was on appearances for Hot and PLJ, I could slip into the bathroom and take care of my habit, check my nose in the mirror, and keep on partying. But now, when I go into a store, I'm followed by chicks who have heard me on the radio and know who I am. I would get a tap on the stall, and someone might say, Wendy, you were talking about Aaron Hall's baby mother the other day. Well, my girl here was dealing with Aaron, and she has more stuff to tell you. Sheila, get over and tell Wendy what's going on with you and Aaron Hall. Meanwhile, I'm hunched over the seat with my Coke and a straw doing a one-on-one where you take a hit to one nostril and then a hit to another. Bang, bang. What a rush. At the white stations on appearances, the girls in the bathroom were polite and would say hello, but no one was banging on my stall trying to talk to me. By the time I got out of the stall, the bathroom is now full of women wanting to tell me something or say hello. All I wanted to do was get my hits on, check my nose, and get the fuck out of the bathroom. But now I am forced to deal with the public in a way I had never imagined. I'm trying to get high, but I'm also trying to build what I hope was a long career in radio. That meant paying attention to the listeners. Every listener counts, particularly in the jump off stage. This was becoming a difficult balancing act for me. These girls know the score. They know what a cokehead looks like. You could always play it off being high in a club. You could play it off like you're drunk, which was acceptable. But the way I was using, I would eventually become very hard to hide what I was up to. It became such a problem that I would get high as much as I could before my appearances so that I wouldn't have to take a bathroom break. We'd pull up to a club, and at this time I was rolling with Skeletor, my assistant, and Bulge, my security. I would send the fellows in to scope out the club and make sure the money was right, while I'd sit in the car and sniff coke until they came back. No one knew what I was up to. Neither Skell nor Bulge indulged. I kept my balancing act going, but I was becoming bigger and bigger on the air. There were articles written about me. In 1993, I was named Billboard Magazine's Radio Personality of the Year. I was in the spotlight. I had become that girl. I was talking that shit that everybody wanted to hear. On the radio, I was becoming Queen of New York. Chapter 6. Hey DJ, while I was dancing with the white lady, I really didn't have time to dance with anyone else. I was I wasn't thinking about sex or dating or anything. I spent all of my time plotting on the next time I would get high and how. Instead of thinking about dating, my main concerns were, am I going to slice my lines with a matchbook or a razor? And what kind of mirror was I going to use? Which spoon would I use to cook it? How many lighters did I need for my session? Or should I use a butane torch? You can get calluses using lighters too often. How many cigarettes would I need to smoke to make the appropriate amount of ashes for my sessions? When I cook coke, I use a layer of ashes as a filter. My main social activity was preparing to get high, getting high, coming down from my high, and plotting my next time to get high. Getting high became my second job because when I was using cocaine at this point, I would get I would get really lazy. I was so lazy that I started leaving bottles of water in the freezer when I was sober because once I was high, I knew I would be too lazy to pour water into a glass. I would even plot on what I would wear, my high gear, because I knew I would be too lazy to change. So I had to have on clothes comfortable enough to sleep in and clean looking enough to perhaps wear to work the next day because sometimes I would be too lazy to change my clothes for work. I didn't have time for men and relationships at the height of my addiction, but somehow one managed to work his way in. I heard through the grapevine that this very popular DJ, one half of a famous DJ rap duo, thought I was very cute and wanted to get to know me. I was very familiar with him. His group was legendary. He had somewhat of a juice card, which kind of turned me on. I really wasn't thinking about him having a lot of money and all that. Money was never a motivating factor for me. It was 1990 and I was living in a one-bedroom apartment that had mice. But I had a housekeeper. It was a heavily Hispanic neighborhood on Washington Avenue in Union City. I was renting from people who were actually listeners of mine. I later found out. I must say, when I found out that the person I was renting from was a listener, I was a little embarrassed. I mean, she knew how I was really living. I totally understand why rappers front a certain image to the world because when people listen and they realize what your actual deal is, there's a big letdown for a fan. The woman I was renting from owned the apartment and moved to a bigger place after she got married. I found her place advertised in the newspapers and I got it immediately. I know she was telling her friends, I'm renting to Wendy Williams. There were many people who still remembered me from my days at Hot. I had just started working at Kiss during the night shift, and coupled with the appearances I may have had after my shift, the hours were getting a little too hectic to be driving about an hour each way up and down the highway from New York to my parents' house every night. So I moved to Union City, which was a 10-minute ride to the city. The apartment had mice, but it also had all of the amenities I needed, including a washer and dryer inside the unit. And it gave me the privacy I needed to continue my habit in peace. It also gave me the freedom to date. If I ever found spare time between working and this coke thing, the DJ, we'll call him Johnny T, gave me reason to find some time for him. I met him at Kiss. I was interviewing him about a hit song he had done on a movie soundtrack. He went out of his way to introduce himself to me. I found him to be very nice and charming. He was good looking in person as he was on the album cover. More importantly, he was a perfect body match for me. I preferred a big man, a man who could handle me. I still do. On our first date, he picked me up in a truck, piped out, rapper style, with the rims and all the whistles and bells. But little did I know that he didn't have money like that. It was all a front. And I was so naive back then. I think even in my own fame, I probably was a bit of a groupie and impressed with all of the bells and whistles. I wasn't used to wearing my own badge of fame yet. I guess I looked at him as someone who would validate my fame, give me cachet. And I guess I brought something to the table for him too. He was dating Wendy from the radio. We didn't have a lot in common socially. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke weed, he didn't even use a lot of foul language. He definitely didn't do coke. In fact, I never dated a man with a habit. In a strange way, being with me brought him more sophistication. We became intimate. He made me feel that it would be okay, like he would protect me. Johnny T's status was way bigger than the R&B singer who raped me. And despite all my fears, I allowed him to have sex with me without wearing a condom. I hear he is now dating an author, and I'm sure not wearing condoms with her either because lepers don't change their spots. But that's another story for another day. Johnny T was very private. He only gave me his pager number, but I didn't think anything of it at the time because, well, I was dating a famous DJ and he was with me. Who cares about a number? And besides, I was too caught up in my own shit to notice that there's really something strange about being in a relationship with a man who can only reach who you can only reach through his pager. At this point, my life was wonderful. Doing the night shift was great because I got to meet everyone. All of the big artists were now making the rounds to my show as well. And I didn't quite realize my own impact because I lived in a bubble. I would go in my bubble at the studio. And when I was home, I had my habit. My habit was everything outside of the studio, and any appearances I made for the station were one big blur. The appearances became, for me, just a place where I would pick up extra money to get back to my habit. I never dwelled in the VIP areas drinking champagne or socializing. I didn't have time for that. I had a package waiting for me. But my fog was lifting temporarily. I didn't mind bringing attention to myself at this point. I was dating a famous DJ and a man who was sober, and it was okay to be seen because my habit was under control, or so I thought. I started to enjoy my celebrity. I enjoyed everything about being involved with someone who was famous. I loved the scene, and at some point I thought that I could love him. But I never remember getting caught up in that. Oh, I love him, gushy mushy sort of thing. And I know I didn't love him enough to stop my habit. He never even knew that I had a habit, nor did I love him enough to press for a home phone number. Dumb bitch. That I was for allowing him to get away with that pager shit. Nor did I love him enough to bring him home. He was never worthy of family introductions. We all go through it, though. Some of us, unfortunately, don't ever snap out of it. Looking back, I was just one long extended booty call for him. We didn't really have a relationship. It was all sex. The only time we really dated was at the very beginning of the relationship. Maybe we had 8 dates during the course of that first year. Then it was him calling me at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to come over. That's a booty call, right? Stranger things began to take place, like his truck would always be broken and in the shop. I started to realize things about him during my peaks of sobriety. He didn't realize any of the things about me, like I was a cokehead, because he didn't really care about me. I was his booty call. And to make matters worse, the sex wasn't even that good. He never went down on me, and when we had sex, it was quick and without a condom. I must have been really high to allow that. Somewhere in my twisted mind, I must have believed I was his only one, and that he was really in the studio every night with his rap partner, and that's why he came over so late. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink, and he rarely cursed. And I guess I equated his behavior with being a good man. He ordered grapefruit juice all the time, and I was just the one ordering the hard liquor and doing cocaine. But on the outside, I was the nice girl from Wayside. And from the outside, we looked like a great couple. He had his own apartment, which I never visited. When he wasn't with me, he was spending time with his daughter or in the studio, or so he said. When we were together, his pager never went off, so it didn't appear that he had another woman or even his baby's mother hounding him. That's what I thought. So what? I wouldn't see him. So what? I wouldn't see him for 2 or 3 days. He was busy, and he would eventually always come around. At 2 in the morning, he would call and tell me he was on his way. Oh, it's been so hectic, he would say. I'm coming over to see my baby. Most of the time, he would get right to the sex. I figured he had a lot of stress, and it had been built up all day for 3 days since he had last seen me. We would have sex, and I never had an orgasm. He doesn't eat pussy. Sex with him was not a pleasure, but I didn't care because when he left, I pleased myself the way I had during my time in the Virgin Islands. For some reason, I never really sweated it like that, having an orgasm during sex. But believe me, I have since snapped out of that mindset. It is a must today. Thinking back, how selfish was that on his part? But there will always be men like that as long as there are women like I was. It was all my fault for accepting that shit. I put up with it. Being with him, I learned another valuable lesson. When you have sex, even bad sex, even sex without an orgasm, and you don't use a condom, you can get pregnant or worse. Yes, the trusty EPT test came back positive. And even in my cocaine haze, it didn't take much for me to make the decision. Hell no, I wasn't having his baby. At this point, he had shown his true colors. He had borrowed money under the guise it was for a birthday present for his daughter. I realized financially speaking, he was not at all. Not all that he was cracked up to be, and definitely not the kind of man I wanted to raise a child with. He borrowed the little eagle talon I bought with vanity plates that read Wendy. This was 1990 into 1991, and I thought it was a step up from the Subaru. And putting my name on the plates, well, that was really balling. We have been dating about a year, and now I'm pregnant. And this relationship is real shady. Not only did I have a pager number, but he wouldn't call back right away, even if I put 911 after my number. Back then, I was using 911 the way girls use it today, not for real emergencies. I was really being the dumb bitch. I was the dumb bitch on a few counts. First, for accepting only booty calls, and second, for not using a condom, and last, for allowing myself to be nothing in his life. I never met his mother or his daughter. I met a few of his friends because looking back, I realized that he enjoyed being with Wendy Williams. I wasn't on the radio talking about our relationship, but it was nice for him to be around his friends with me. People saw us out, but he didn't want us to be on the radio about it because I guess that was an effort to shield the other bitches that he was fucking from the truth. No, I never saw us getting married because too many things started happening. He was borrowing my car more and more and would be driving around for hours, sometimes leaving me stranded. I'd be waiting and waiting and waiting, tapping my feet and looking at my watch, waiting for my ride to pick me up in my own damn car to either go to work or be picked up from work. I would often have to take cabs to or from work, and my dumbass would never go off on him. When he finally did show up apologizing, I would say, "That's okay, baby. Let that shit happen today." He would always use the studio as the excuse, and I would never suspect that it was anything other than that. His other thing would be that he had to pick up his daughter, who I completely understood was his first love. When I got my car back, I would never comb it for weave hairs or look for lipstick or anything like that. It just never crossed my mind. Oh, and Mr. Trifling would not only show up frequently late with my car, but would give it back to me practically on fumes, below E. And what would I do? Tell him, well, all right, you know you left me with a little bit of gas, so next time take the gas card and fill it up for me, baby, okay? So I gave him the credit card. Finally, at one point, I decided my car was being used too much and I rented him a car. I decided my car was being, oh, okay. He had no credit card to rent one himself. I'm cheap, so I wanted to rent him a car from one of those low rent rental agencies, but it would take a couple of days. He was demanding. Baby, I need a car now, he said. There's a car rental place on 43rd Street. This was near the station right in the heart of Times Square. Read, this car costs an arm and leg to rent. My credit card still had a fucked up interest rate that was about 21%. I might have had a $1,500 limit because I screwed up my credit in college buying shit I didn't need and not paying it off on time. You know I didn't have a job back then. I hadn't had my big financial light bulb moment at this point, which was my divorce. So I rented him a car for what was supposed to be 3 days, but ended up being 30 days. No lie. He had used up the entire balance on my credit card. I could not remember one gift that he had given me. While I'm not the gift receiving type, a little pair of silver hoops at Christmas time or a card or a rose would have been nice. He was never available, so I spent my time with my lovely family back in Wayside. I never second guessed it because I always had my own family. And next to my own family at Christmas, a package would have been the next most important thing to me. Then my job, and then him. After the 13th day with the car, and the rental agency started calling me like crazy. They threatened to call the cops and report the car stolen. Finally, Johnny T answered one of my 911 pages. I told him the cops now have the plate number, so he needed to return the car. I had seen enough of a temper in this guy. And mind you, he didn't have a bad temper, but I had seen enough that I knew that he could flip on me. I was already putting two and two together that I was just a side piece, a booty call. He returned the car with an attitude. I took it back to the rental agency, and the bill was thousands of dollars. I was over my credit limit. He never gave me any money for the car, and I never paid him again. That was the way the relationship ended. He never called me again, and I realized what I was to him and had put him in a category. You live, you learn, you move on, and get over it. He did, however, leave me with a seed growing in my body. I had never been pregnant before in my life, and I didn't know what the hell I was going through. I decided to take the test because one evening, while I was coming around the loop inside the Lincoln Tunnel on my way home, and I had to pull over to vomit, my first thought was, oh Lord, I'm pregnant. I knew what I wanted to do at that point. I knew that in New Jersey, 2 signatures were needed for any type of abortion. I had always been pro choice, and while I had never been pregnant, I had always prepared for it. Don't ask me where I got this knowledge. I guess I read enough magazines and watched enough Lifetime to know things. And even through my cocaine haze, I knew that I was too much of a catch for a guy that was a part of the rap culture, baby's mama drama, and shady ways, to drop a seed in me and move on. Please. I made my appointment at a clinic in Manhattan. I had a perfectly good GYN in New Jersey and good insurance, but I did not want this information getting out. I was popular. I have always been paranoid, and until this day, I'm still very paranoid with medical records and things like that circulating around. So I made my appointment for an abortion at a clinic that I found in the yellow pages because I wasn't asking anyone for any references. I took the day off from work, took a cab to the city, filled out the paperwork, and made it seem like my boyfriend was coming back to get me later. I had on a baseball cap pulled down low, with no fake ponytail, no makeup, no nail tips, and no jewelry. I was ready for surgery. I didn't give them my real name. Was I scared? No. I felt no connection to the baby, which was about 6 weeks into developing. I looked at it as a little lima bean. I didn't feel like it was my child. There was no emotional attachment to it or to the father at this point. Hell, I felt more connected to the coke that was waiting for me when I got home. And that was another factor with getting the abortion. I thought even if I stopped doing the coke right then, what effect would my previous use have on the baby? I didn't know under what circumstances the baby would be born. I was doing coke every single day, and he didn't know. When you see a DJ on a booty call, it's not like you're waking up in the morning spooning each other. He was hitting the skins and scramming. If I was lucky, I might get a couple of phone calls during the day, but those calls were always made in front of his boys so he could show off, show his control over me. Those conversations would go something like this. I'll be I'll be by around 2 to pick up the car, and I'll talk to you later when I get out of the studio, whenever that is. Then he would get off the phone. I was probably the brunt of all kinds of jokes. There was no way I was having his baby. I wanted every part of him expelled from my body. I did not tell a soul about the pregnancy or the abortion, especially not him. This was the kind of man who, if he knew that I was pregnant, would all of a sudden become righteous. And if he found out I had an abortion, he would go around all hurt, letting the hip hop nation know what I had done to him. There was no doubt in my mind that he would have wanted me to keep the baby because he was a product of his environment and I was a catch, quite frankly. And for me to have his baby would have been some sort of feather in his cap. I paid for the abortion with cash, honey. There would be no paper trail on this kid. I told the people at the clinic that my man was coming to pick me up and they didn't check. Right before the abortion, they did an ultrasound to see if I was still pregnant and they asked me if I wanted to see. No, I said. When it was done, I felt nothing emotionally. I was numb. I woke up groggy, lined up next to a bunch of other people who had to have been taken care of in the clinic. I might have been the only well-paid, well-insured dumb bitch in there. When the grogginess wore off, I ate some crackers, drank some juice, took the elevator downstairs, got in a cab, and went home. I never shed a tear. I never called the nigga back, and I never looked back. I don't feel bad to this day because having that baby would not have been the right thing to do. And I never blame my past actions on what I eventually went through trying to have a baby with the man I eventually fell in love with. A man who gives me orgasms and for whom I became his wife and who finally became the father of my child. But that day was a long time coming with a lot of pain and heartache in between. But the experiences and that man were certainly worth the wait.